Hey everybody, John here. I promise I'm just about to get out of your way. Before I do, I just wanted to make sure I gave a very special shout out to everybody who subscribes to Secret Base's Patreon channel. You made this possible, you made a lot of other stuff possible, and in the months to come, you're going to make even more stuff possible, including monthly episodes of Pretty Good from me that Patreon subscribers will see months before they drop on YouTube. If you were a Patreon subscriber from the jump, you might not be watching this because you got to see Reform, 4 or 5 months ago? If you are watching, thank you so much. And if you would like to subscribe and see what it's all about, patreon.com/secretbase. All right, thanks everybody. With that said, enjoy part 2 of Reform. Let's return once again to the fall of 1990. 2 fuses have been lit. First, Jack Gargan has taken out a series of full-page newspaper ads demanding we vote every single elected official out of office, and what now looks like little more than birdcage lining will in fact directly build momentum for Ross Perot's independent run for president in 1992. That in turn will birth the Reform Party, the only third party of modern American times to ever earn respect as even a quasi-major player. At the same time, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota resident Jesse Ventura enters the political arena. Although he's initially motivated by a desire to save local wetlands from developers, he, like Gargan, is disgusted with career politicians, has a campaign slogan that's very similar to Gargan's, and shares Gargan's interest in limiting their terms. Ventura runs for mayor of Brooklyn Park, population about 50,000, and cruises to victory over his opponent, an 18-year incumbent who, before the race is over, expresses a sort of awe. He's never seen a communicator quite like Ventura. If the American people know Jesse Ventura, they know him as the Body, or Cooper from Predator, or Captain Freedom from The Running Man. He's so gigantic and hypermasculine it borders on caricature. His indoor speaking voice sounds like an idling Harley Davidson. It takes a little bit of work to show the voting public that he's not in fact the reactionary many might assume him to be. Granted, he does lean libertarian economically. On the matter of healthcare, he sounds like a Reaganite, decrying the state's Medicaid program as, quote, socialized medicine. His relationship with unions is pretty interesting. Even after he berates AFL-CIO leaders for not supporting him, they still seem to kinda like him. Meanwhile, he swings pretty far to the left on many social issues, and not in the passive libertarian do-whatever-you-want kind of way. He is vocally pro-choice and is pro-gay rights in an era when that is pretty atypical. He took a lot of heat as mayor of Brooklyn Park for simply arguing that people of color should have more of a say politically. Most uniquely, he maintains a firmly anti-war footing and was one of the very few public figures to speak out against the first Gulf War, the quote-unquote good war in the public imagination. In keeping with his principles and his word, Ventura declines to seek a second term as mayor of Brooklyn Park. It's not long before he pulls himself right back into politics, affiliating himself with the Minnesota branch of the Reform Party. Ventura is a great fit for the Reform platform, even facetiously, because what is the Reform Party if not a literal, straight-faced answer to a Ziggy comic strip? You know, the kind of stuff Ziggy says, like, Republican Party, Democratic Party, heck, I'd rather have a pizza party. Okay, here's the third pizza party you have requested. These days, you can't tell the difference between politics and the dang WWF. Okay, roger that. In terms of persona and intrigue, it's safe to say Ventura has got the juice and is the first one to come around here who rivals Perot in this department. He tilts right fiscally as other reformers do, while pulling the party a little bit to the left socially. He's a real politician with real established positions, but it's still unsurprising that most observers take it as a joke when he expresses interest in entering the 1998 Minnesota governor's race. At the outset, it looks as hopeless as Gargan's newspaper ads once did. He's up against Republican Norm Coleman, the entrenched mayor of St. Paul who's riding a wave of goodwill after bringing the NHL back to Minnesota, and Democrat Skip Humphrey, the even more entrenched son of a former vice president and Minnesota senator. There's a lot less precedent for celebrity politicians in 1998 than there will be in the 21st century. I mean, at least Ronald Reagan and Sonny Bono were mainstream figures. Ventura has the stink of the silly, unserious WCW and WWF all over him. He isn't getting a lot of media play, and his campaign doesn't have the money to get him on TV, so he has few chances to defy anybody's expectations as Coleman and Humphrey dominate the airwaves. In late September, just 6 weeks prior to the election, voters still don't really know what Ventura is about. They haven't had the chance to find out. It's not that they see him negatively, it's just that they don't see him, period. Consequently, he sometimes isn't even listed as an option on polls, and when he is, he floats around 10%. Name recognition is probably the only thing keeping him that high. He seems destined to languish there as a protest candidate, an option that polled likely voters only select because it's a more fun, eccentric way of saying, I have no opinion. But debate season changed everything for Ross Perot in '92, and here, it'll change everything for Jesse Ventura. Early in the first debate, Humphrey and Coleman are squabbling over some supposed misquote nobody cares about, when some deft camera work, and equally deft Jesse Ventura, make it clear.
Well, I think it shows obviously who's above all of this, doesn't it?
This is a three-man race. Humphrey, in particular, doesn't seem to appreciate this fact. He keeps attacking Coleman, ignoring Ventura entirely, even though it's clear Ventura is racking up huge points, framing these two as no different from their Washington counterparts and no different from each other. Minutes later, when Coleman, who in the past has been both a Democrat and a Republican, trots out the usual reach across the aisle stuff.
It is about getting things done. It is about working hand in hand with folks on both sides of the aisle.
Ventura is perfectly positioned to jump all over him.
I'd like to say you're right, Mr. Coleman. You have been on both sides of the aisle. I'm not sure if you're a Republican or Democrat, because as mayor of St. Paul, you've been both.
The people of Minnesota like what they see. Ventura makes modest gains in the polls. His odds, while still long, now float somewhere north of impossible. But he's running out of money. He can't find a bank that'll offer his campaign a loan. See, there is a 5% financing rule in play here, although it works a little bit different than it did for Perot. Ventura's got a $300,000 public subsidy waiting for him after Election Day and wants a loan that he will pay off with that subsidy. Thing is, if he doesn't reach 5% of the popular vote, deal's off, he gets no money to pay off that loan. And although Ventura is well above that line in the polls, it would seem the banks just aren't buying it. They don't think he's for real. So, entering the final weeks of the campaign, Ventura can't even afford to buy any TV spots, which in 1990s politics spells disaster. This is tragic for the Reform Party. Their most viable and high-profile candidate, of course, has been Ross Perot, who earned about 19% of the popular vote in the '92 presidential election. But Perot, the billionaire, had to spend about $60 million to get there, buying entire half-hour primetime slots on broadcast TV. And now here we have Ventura, the reform candidate who's polling about as high as Perot was with a shoestring budget. Not only does Ventura have the juice, he is the only potential candidate in the Reform Party who has any juice at all. Perot's viability as a candidate is spent, he knows it, everybody knows it. Behind him are a bunch of jobbers who've run for Congress, the House, the Senate, and collected 3% of the vote if they're lucky. The bench is empty. Ventura is the Reform Party's last chance, its only chance, of making something of itself. In desperation, Ventura's campaign reaches out to National Reform Party headquarters down in Dallas, asking them for a cash infusion. They're not asking for anything close to what the Democrats and Republicans are working with, just a little bit to help them get over the line. Ross Perot says no. And if that isn't the most Reform Party turn of events possible, I don't know what is. $20,000. That's all we were talking about here. For a campaign as broke as Ventura's, that is a meaningful amount. To Perot, the billionaire, that's less than nothing. And although a Ventura defeat does seem like a done deal, chipping in would represent a perfect opportunity to demonstrate that the Reform Party really is bigger than Ross Perot, that others who run on the Reform ticket can expect support. Ventura campaign chairman Dean Barkley charges that this is just the continuation of a petty grudge, that Perot has had it out for the Minnesota Reform Party ever since '96. In that year's Reform Party primary, Minnesota was one of the only states to go to challenger Richard Lamb. Forgotten, apparently, is the '92 campaign when many of the very same people in this Minnesota contingent built one of Perot's most effective and passionate bases of support nationwide. This rift can't be a matter of issues. Ventura is by no means hacking the party name for his own gain. In fact, his platform is very much in line with the national parties. Who knows what the truth really is? Maybe Perot does hold a grudge, maybe they just asked this eternally indecisive man at the wrong time of day. Maybe his ego just can't tolerate the potential emergence of a guy who shares Perot's political positioning, outsider mystique, and gift for drumming up attention, but who, in stark contrast to Perot, is big, imposing, thunderous, and most crucially, and most unlike Perot, decisive and impossible to scare off. Whatever the case might be, Perot does exactly what he did in '92. When he's needed the most, when the opportunity is greatest, he shrugs and he walks away. But you know, there's a scene in The Running Man in which Ventura's character, Captain Freedom, is ordered to come out of retirement and hunt Arnold Schwarzenegger down live on national TV. And they strap all this shitty, useless armor on him because they think it'll play well on TV.
I don't need this crap. This stuff is garbage.
This crap represents all the things you're supposed to require to win a major election. Major party affiliations, soft money, friends in the establishment. Jesse doesn't need any of it. He has something more powerful.
This is a sport of death and honor. Go to the gladiators.
He has himself. A week later, Ventura finally does secure a desperately needed loan, albeit for far less than what his opponents are working with. His campaign nonetheless buys a couple of TV ads that ingeniously play into the things that Jesse Ventura, and only Jesse Ventura, can pull off. Skip Humphrey could not in a million years convincingly sell the idea that kids would actually play with his action figure.
This bill wastes taxpayer money. Redraft it.
Norm Coleman could not in a million years cut a campaign ad in which he sits there a loincloth removed from full-on butt-ass naked. That's all it took. Just a little bit of money was all it took to elevate him from interesting also-ran to serious threat. Coleman and Humphrey had spent so much time attacking each other that by late October they've almost run out of time to figure out what to do about Ventura. By the end of the month, he's only about 10 points behind both of them in the polls. He's even nice enough to slap together a little October surprise for his opponents. Hey guys, look at me. I want to decriminalize sex work and drugs. There you go, enjoy. Unsurprisingly, both opponents raced to condemn Ventura and his remarks as outrageous, unsafe, scary. Ventura responds, "The war on drugs has failed. Get over it, losers." Haven't watched this entire dust-up unfold. Voters are polled once again on the candidates, and Ventura goes that way. It's nice, no doubt, but he's still looking up at not one but two candidates who are locked in a dead heat with one another. Because of that, both are about to empty out massive war chests to take one another down. Both belong to parties that have worked Minnesota for eons and have hoarded reams of voter data. The Ventura campaign has none of that. They'll be flying blind and broke throughout the entire final week, a week in which, it's pointed out, elections are typically decided by the campaign's ability to organize. So maybe reform isn't ready to win just yet. Regardless, pundits across the country now recognize Ventura as a force to be taken seriously, a candidate who might actually spoil this thing and steal enough votes from the faltering Humphrey to give the election to Coleman. Doing so would, in and of itself, prove that the Reform Party is more than just Ross Perot's vanity project. Other candidates could run under this banner, influence elections, if not win them outright, and give the major parties something to be afraid of. For that reason, this is a victory no matter what. The point has been made, the shot across the bow has landed. Jesse Ventura is not going to win, and that is okay.
It's 1998, and the American dream lives on in Minnesota as we shock the world.
That is not hyperbole on Ventura's part. This shocked the world not only because a pro wrestler took down a Humphrey in the state of Minnesota, not only because he did so on an impossibly tight budget, but because he did so by accomplishing one of the most difficult things in American politics, drawing out the youth vote in large numbers. Further, he won this thing on the issues. This was not the gimmick campaign it first appeared to be. Ventura has found a variant of the Reform Party platform that can win. He's demonstrated that the stock reform model of fiscal conservatism, combining with waving the white flag on social issues, is not enough. You can't just meekly punk out on things like women's rights and gay rights the way libertarians do. If you proactively advocate for and champion these things and appeal directly to the people who care about them, you can get there. Suddenly, and almost impossibly, This concept of the powerful third party in modern American politics has now found a second life. Up ahead is the 2000 presidential election, where thanks to Ross Perot's showing in the 96 election, $12.6 million in guaranteed matching federal funds are waiting for the Reform Party nominee. This is the number around which everything and everybody will orbit from this point forward. It's a far cry from the $67 million the Republican and Democratic nominees will receive, but it's enough to get a winning message out there if they have one. It would seem that they do. Once again, there is more than one definition of winning. In 2000, winning will mean regaining ground in the popular vote and keeping the matching funds train rolling well into the future, and the timing couldn't be better. This will be an election in which both major party candidates are rolling into the general as damaged goods, with George W. Bush surviving a tough primary and VP Al Gore trying to distance himself from his scandal-ridden president, Bill Clinton. These two demonstrate that this political spectrum chart is really starting to fail us. On paper, they stand far apart, creating the illusion that they offer voters two distinct choices. But the one thing the Reform Party has always been right about is that the Dems and GOPs are both beholden to the man behind the curtain. Neither will challenge the military-industrial complex. Neither will turn their backs on corporations. It is reasonable to assume that the future will be very different depending on which of these two are elected, but in practice, the gap between them is much smaller than it appears. And most reformers would argue there is no meaningful gap at all. If they can do what they did in '98 and run someone not named Ross Perot and continue to surpass 5% of the popular vote to lock in matching funds for the future, that will count as liftoff. And it's not exclusively a long play either. Showings like this can help precipitate results here and now. You remember Jack Gargan's primary grievance that kicked off this entire thing? That $3 trillion national debt? Well, guess what? On an annual basis, at least, we've dug ourselves out of it. Gargan took out those newspaper ads in 1990, a year in which the national deficit surpassed $200 billion. In our time, it's way, way bigger than that, and very few of us seem to even notice or give a shit. But the point is, in the 90s, people really do care about this. And look what started happening in 92, the year Perot first started campaigning on this. The deficit gradually disappeared. In 2000, we're going to be running an annual surplus for the third straight year. But I can't blame reformers for placing the win in their own column. They believed their agenda was co-opted by the major parties, who realized they had to do something to quell this 19% uprising. Maybe, at some point far down the line, the Reform Party can win the presidency, but until then, it's possible they can successfully push forward their agenda regardless. They can win without winning. What this also means, of course, is that they no longer have the deficit to run on. Their platform's biggest plank has been rendered unnecessary. Reformers are going to have to redefine themselves, make new promises, deliver a new message. What will that message be? To do that, the party is going to have to patch itself up in the wake of Ventura's victory. These two major reform powers will have to forge an alliance. The one thing we cannot have on our hands here is Ventura versus Perot. First things first, Ross Perot has to eat his crow. He comes crawling back to Ventura, of course, declaring this a monumental win for the Reform Party. His right-hand man in Dallas, Russ Verney, says Ventura will bring about a new day in politics. Russ Verney, that is a name to know, and this is the time to start talking about factions. We're going to keep things as simple as we can here because it'll get hopelessly confusing otherwise. I'll give you a couple of examples. Back in '97, a splinter group of reformers were unhappy with Ross's recent shenanigans en route to strong-arming Dick Lamb out of the party nomination, so they broke off into the American Reform Party and mounted an extremely unsuccessful effort to argue that the future matching funds belonged to them. Not long after, we saw another offshoot in the founding of the very real, officially registered Reform Silly Party, which advocates that all Americans should be drafted into getting married at age 25 and that all politicians should serve 2 terms and then be executed by the state. These two offshoots, believe it or not, achieve an identical degree of irrelevance. In Florida, for example, both parties boast just over 50 registered members. So hopefully this gives you a taste of how Byzantine this can all get and makes it clear why I'm sticking with 2 sides named Side 1 and Side 2. There'll be about a dozen major players on the national level of the Reform Party, and there'll be so many switchings of sides that neither side will have any coherent, consistent position at all other than side 1 opposing side 2 and side 2 opposing side 1. Side 1, for now, harbors an alliance of Jack Gargan and Ross Perot. Orson Swindle was once here, but he had a falling out with Perot and soon left the party altogether. Same for Dick Lamb, who Perot recruited to the party and then very quickly got bored with. Ventura, for the moment, is aligned with the Perot faction by default, which brings us to Russ Verney. Verney, the chairman of the Reform Party, is unshakably loyal to Ross Perot. He's sort of Perot's Larry Middleman figure, a guy who serves as his surrogate and carries out his wishes verbatim, including, as Richard Lamb alleged, helping concoct the mailing list shenanigans that hampered his failed nomination. A good rule of thumb going forward, whenever Russ Verney says something, it's as though Perot himself said it. But Ventura sees all these kind words for exactly what they are. They would certainly prefer for everybody to forget that just 1 month prior, Perot slammed the door on him, refusing to even throw him walking around money. Ventura has not forgotten, and just a day after his historic win, he's already considering disaffiliating with the National Party and making the Minnesota chapter independent. Soon after, he calls out Perot in the press and says he should not even think about making a third presidential run in 2000. And if Perot did harbor any interest in running again, it's quite possible that Ventura's thumbs down just killed it. Ventura now overshadows Perot as figuratively as he does literally. In a world just a little bit different, one in which Perot could stifle his general Perotness for just a little bit, this could have been an elegant passing of the torch. Everybody could have looked good. Something more substantial might have been built. And while Ventura does ultimately decide to keep the Minnesota Reform Party coupled with the National Party for the time being, he has very clearly told Ross Perot to get lost. This Minnesota-Dallas rivalry never ends, does it? If it's not the Drew Pearson Hail Mary, if it's not the Herschel Walker trade, if it's not Dallas stealing Minnesota's hockey team, it's this. While the meaningful differences between Side 1 and Side 2 will soon become completely inscrutable, here in 1998 the line is clearly drawn. You're either with the Dallas faction or with the Minnesota faction. Ventura doesn't seem very interested in wresting control of the National Party himself, but he does want to limit Perot's influence. Step 1 is to extract Russ Verney, the party chairman, the unquestioned Perot loyalist, but who to replace him with? Ventura is the party newcomer, and handpicking one of his own people would start a riot. So, Ventura throws his weight behind the true believer, the man who started it all, our old friend, Jack Gargan. Since we last left him, Gargan has unsuccessfully run for a number of offices, most recently for the House of Representatives in '98 as the Reform candidate, and although he lost, he'd claimed about a third of the vote against an incumbent Democrat, which appears to be the best Reform performance to date from anybody not named Jesse Ventura. So on paper it makes sense, and it certainly doesn't hurt that Gargan has lost faith in Perot entirely. He's among a pretty substantial chunk of former Perot supporters who bailed on him after he bailed on them back in '92. So, Jack Gargan, welcome to Side 2. As we can see, Perot kinda has a way of repelling former allies, doesn't he? A couple days later, Ventura puts a point on it, declaring that if they don't get Russ Verney out of the office of party chair, Ventura is taking his ball and going home. A week later, like clockwork, Verney announces he will not seek another term. He insists that Ventura's ultimatum had nothing to do with it, but it does have the desired effect. A few weeks after that, at the Reform Convention, Jack Gargan is voted in as party chair. Pretty ruthless series of moves by Ventura here, and ones that were probably necessary. Ross Perot was essential in the early going because he was the rarest of things, a billionaire who knew how to talk to America and convinced a very large chunk of it that he recognized its problems and cared about solving them. But a potential third presidential run for Perot would probably extinguish this movement entirely and had to be cut off at the pass. And it's hard not to be happy for Jack, who's always embodied the core convictions of this movement better than anybody, who, unlike Perot, has never wavered, never waffled. At the same convention in which Gargan is elected as party chair, Perot addresses the Reform Party for the final time in an official capacity. He uses this opportunity to try to recast his image as one of an elder statesman and unifier, calling for the party to overcome petty differences and come together.
The last thing I want is all of these things that I see in the paper day in and day out about catfights and this and that and the other that have nothing to do with fact, but make great fiction. And I think if we are, just remember, united teams win and divided teams lose.
That's advice that he, of course, has never taken. And in fact, it's his own meddling and indecisiveness that's created these fissures in the first place. But in this moment, he gives the impression that he wants to be that guy, that revered father of the party, that some of him perhaps wishes he was that guy. But it's just not in him. He can't sit still. He's about to fade into the shadows, but even from there, he's about to pull one last lever, touch one final hot stove that will deliver chaos upon this reform party unlike anything else it has ever seen. See, Perot is quietly, yet decisively, lobbying for the man who he believes should be the Reform Party candidate for president in the 2000 election. This man is Pat Buchanan. This cast of characters, both the ones you've met and the ones you haven't yet, is one made up of imperfect people with quirks, eccentricities, flaws, and failings. Pat Buchanan's definitional quality, the one that sets him far apart from the rest of these remarkable people, is that he is a big bag of shit. He is a man of comprehensively awful beliefs who has been one for a long, long time. And in fact, it's here that Buchanan necessitates a content advisory. He'll be a major figure throughout the remainder of this story, and it isn't possible to accurately portray him without cataloging all the racist, anti-Semitic, sexist, and homophobic things that he said and that he stands for, so there's the advisory. If you're still up for it, let's examine the track record of one Pat Buchanan. In 1977, Buchanan felt compelled to write that although Adolf Hitler committed genocide, he was nonetheless an individual of great courage and genius. While a Republican in the late 70s, before the GOP had become the fully reactionary engine it is today, he was hell-bent on taking it there, arguing that the GOP should simply give up trying to represent or appeal to black voters entirely. He's obsessed with white birth rates falling below those of people of color, calling it, quote, racial suicide. He has dabbled in Holocaust denialism. He's come to the defense of Nazis who have been accused of war crimes. He endorses the belief that white people are genetically, intellectually superior. He describes immigrants as invaders unless, and this is important, they're white. He approvingly cites and amplifies things written by neo-Nazis. He says that women are genetically inferior intellectually to men. He argues that Holocaust survivors are making too big a deal of the Holocaust. He believes America should legislate exactly how many people of each race should live here. He calls gay people Satanists. All this is only a small sample of the garbage he spent decades dumping in books and spouting on TV. How is he even allowed into polite society to begin with? Well, having worked in the Nixon and Reagan White Houses, as well as having been a newspaper columnist and talk show circuit regular, he bears the credentials of a person who surely couldn't be that bad, surely couldn't be this bigoted. You couldn't ask for a more edifying window into how a lot of media really works than this. In 2017, Buchanan's one-time MSNBC co-host will describe his views as, quote, abhorrent, but will look past it because he's a nice guy. To him. That's really all it takes. In Slate, this selective blindness toward Buchanan is described thusly, quote, it's almost easier to believe Buchanan isn't saying what he seems to be saying than to recognize his views for what they are. This would appear to be the case with the Perot camp that's trying to recruit him right now, as later statements will indicate. And that's on them, because that is the one and only thing that is not on Buchanan. Perot appears to like him because he's a recognizable name who checks the reform boxes of opposing things like term limits, and apparently he's said some stuff, but he's on TV all the time, so again, he can't be that bad. It seems likely that Buchanan also appeals to Perot because the two took turns beating up on their mutual rival, George H.W. in '92. But while Perot ran against him in the general, Buchanan, then a Republican, did the unthinkable in mounting a primary challenge to a sitting president. While ultimately unsuccessful, Buchanan had identified and rallied a far-right fringe of the GOP that could be riled up with reactionary language. In '96, however, he demonstrated that he was ultimately unelectable. In a wide-open GOP primary without an incumbent, his numbers actually diminished slightly. Here in 1999, we've seen Buchanan spin the wheel a third time, and the only thing he's managed to demonstrate is that electorally, he is a dead battery. Throughout 99, George W. Bush has lorded over a crowded field in the polls. Buchanan has been reduced to a sort of human margin of error, sitting at 3% and staying there. Now, if Buchanan wasn't such a greedy little shit, he'd take this as a cue that he's innately unelectable and should exit the political stage forever. Instead, when Perot's people suggest he jump to the Reform Party, he listens. Even leaving aside his galling worldview, which appears to be shared by nobody else in this party, he's a career loser and warmed-over paleocon who everybody's sick and tired of looking at. If you want to lose, and lose badly, and sell your soul in the process, he's your man. And let's state this plainly, Buchanan is Ross Perot's man, despite the neutral appearance Perot is trying to uphold. Pat Choate was Perot's running mate in '96, and similar to Russ Verney, is in lockstep with him. Choate is also Buchanan's #1 cheerleader within the Reform Party, so he is to be believed when he reveals that Perot wants Buchanan as the nominee. And although his logic isn't elaborated on, I think I know why. I think it's because Buchanan is on TV a lot. He hosted Crossfire on CNN, he's on cable news all the time. Remember back in '92 when Perot wanted to skip conventional campaigning and just go on Larry King all the time instead? And in '96 when he campaigned exclusively from his little TV studio hidey hole? The man loves television. Perot is desperate to pick a household name who can serve as a counterbalancing figure to Ventura and prevent him from dominating the party. Buchanan's problem, of course, is that he's a household name. There is a very tight correlation between knowing Pat Buchanan and disliking Pat Buchanan, but Perot's calculus stops well before reaching this conclusion. He's a TV guy. That's all that matters. Ventura, unlike Perot, sees the existential danger of letting Buchanan into the party from a mile off. He despises every single thing Buchanan stands for, but it goes beyond even that. Ventura understands that Buchanan doesn't care about this party as it stands. He's gonna hijack it, get his grubby little mitts on its $12.6 million in guaranteed matching funds, and transform it from what's more or less a fiscally conservative, socially progressive party into a far-right blood and soil coalition that'll become invisible in the polls. If that happens, and the Reform Party can't pull 5% in the general, the matching funds disappear, and all of this irretrievably goes to shit. Many are calling on Ventura himself to run for the presidential nomination, but his loyalties lie within the state of Minnesota, not the Reform Party that hung him out to dry, and he's not going to bail in the middle of his term as governor. But he is interested in belonging to a party that's strong nationally, so he gets to work picking a horse to run against Buchanan for the nomination. Colin Powell turns him down. John McCain turns him down. Jesse Ventura takes a deep breath and picks up the phone. On the same day Pat Buchanan officially announces his presidential campaign under the Reform banner, Donald Trump officially switches his party registration from Republican to Reform. Like any good reformer, Trump claims to be a deficit hawk, and he scans as somewhat progressive on some social issues at this point in history. And like the proto-reformer himself, Jack Gargan, Trump is no stranger to taking out full-page newspaper ads. His ad advocated for the Central Park Five, all of whom were later exonerated of their charges, to be executed. But ultimately, just about everyone in this story has either a short memory or doesn't care. Ventura is no exception. Trump is listed as a billionaire and could theoretically dump as much as he wants to into a Trump presidential campaign. He has as much name recognition as anybody could hope for. Polls suggest that he could generate a strong voter base. Months before he even joined, he polled higher among reformers than everybody except Perot. And of course, it's hard not to notice Buchanan's humiliating showing in this very same poll. While Trump took nearly 18%, Buchanan stood at 2.7%, which is almost exactly where he stalled out within the GOP primary. The only reason Ventura is as low as he is here is that he has said over and over and over that he is 100% not running for president in 2000, and he's told everyone to not even try to draft him into this race. 3.4% did anyway. So here we've got a guy saying, do not nominate me under any circumstances, outperforming a guy who spent 8 years wandering across America wearing a sandwich board that says, please elect me, please God, I'm begging you. In the future, Ventura will come to see his fellow WWE Hall of Famer a lot differently, but here and now, in the purely tactical sense, Trump seems to be their best chance to save the party from a Buchanan nomination that would represent a guaranteed and eternal trip to Nowheresville. Can Trump win the presidency? Of course not, it's never going to happen, but the objectives that matter most right now are to stamp out Buchanan's pursuit of the nomination, seize control from a Perot faction that has no idea what it's doing, get the popular vote above that 5% waterline, and buy more time for Jesse Ventura to help the Reform Party build and define itself. Given that Ventura recruited him, Trump falls on the side opposite of Ross Perot by default. Crucially though, while he has officially jumped to the party, he has not yet committed to running, seemingly preferring to take a few months to wait and see how this party operates. Well, here's how. In October, Russ Verney, who's still officially the party chair until Ventura guy Jack Gargan takes over at the start of the new year, sees an opportunity to fire a salvo in Ventura's direction. Verney unsuccessfully demands Ventura's resignation from the party. This comes after a wide-ranging Playboy interview in which Ventura says the government orchestrated the JFK assassination, organized religion is a sham, and his dick works great. You can see why the Perot camp might worry about the party's optics here, but where was this concern when they recruited Buchanan, who spent years and years and years leaving a slime trail in his wake? Verney had nothing to say about any of that, and that is because, from here on out, every single move within this party, including this one, is a calculated play to seize control of it. You know, it appears the powers that be might dodge a bullet here. Just when the Reform Party seemed poised to threaten the two-party system, they have themselves become a two-party system. The very thing they hated, with these two rival factions too busy turning on each other to do anything else. The precise sort of gridlock that the party was created to oppose. It's enough to make you wonder whether we're capable of anything else. The battle lines are so clearly drawn here that Ross Perot and Jack Gargan, the two men who started this entire thing, literally haven't even spoken in years. Gargan likens the experience of being incoming party chair to, quote, riding a tiger. He's firmly within the Ventura faction, but ultimately he just wants the party to survive. He's worried, and he has good reason to be. See, Russ Verney correctly suspected that he was likely to be voted out as party chair during the convention in July, so he set a little booby trap. Before the vote, he'd managed to push through new nomination procedures that figured to blow the voting process wide open. In order to cast a vote in the party primary, you used to have to be an official Reform Party member. No longer. Now, literally anybody in America who asks for a Reform ballot will get one. The stated logic here is that the nascent Reform Party needs to build a groundswell by any means necessary and let as many people into the party process as possible, but this leaves the party extremely vulnerable to a hijacking. Any big name with a sizable following can bring their voter base with them and outnumber all comers. This might not be such a concern in the case of somebody like Donald Trump, who at this point in history appears to represent the Reform Party's positions fairly accurately. But Buchanan's malevolent social politics are 1,000 miles off from those of anybody in this party, which typically either leans a little bit progressive or just stays out of social issues entirely. Gargan wants to prevent this by changing the rules and transferring nomination power to core delegates. Verney, the Perot surrogate and therefore the Buchanan guy, wants to keep those rules in place and leave the barn door open for Buchanan, which with every passing day looks like an increasingly catastrophic idea. In December, the party holds a debate featuring Pat Buchanan and a bunch of Reform nobodies, and Buchanan's total inability to draw a crowd is laid bare with only 100 people showing up. One of the mics keeps falling over, the candidates are often drowned out by a Native American ceremony going on next door. One of the candidates, George Weber, sees his name has been misspelled. "We're not doing too good," he sighs. "Ross, you'd really rather have this than that, huh?" Around this time, Gargan fires a decisive shot across the bow, calling a successful vote to move the upcoming Reform Convention from California to Minnesota, which of course is Ventura's backyard. Verney cries foul. The two factions go to court over this. The judge says, "Geez, guys, why can't you figure this out on your own? What is wrong with you people? Go away. Leave me alone." This clears the way for the Perot, Verney, Buchanan faction to ignore the vote and move forward with planning the convention in California. Meanwhile, as the calendar flips over to 2000, they're maneuvering at the state level to select pro-Buchanan delegates to send to the convention, which suddenly makes the location a lot more important. If they hold this thing in Minnesota, that means a lot of the Ventura camp is more likely to show up since they don't need to travel. They're gonna end up holding another vote to determine the location, and everybody seems to take a beat here and acknowledge how stupid all this is. Even Verney can't help but crack a smile. This appears to be the first ever self-aware indication from anywhere in the party that maybe, just maybe, this isn't the party of reform or term limits or budget balancing, but the party of entertainment value. Later in January, there's a window of time lasting perhaps 2 or 3 minutes in which cooler heads do prevail. The two factions get together, jump on a conference call, and discuss a face-to-face meeting where they can hash out their differences. They hold themselves together for just long enough to agree to a meetup in Nashville in February before inevitably yelling and screaming over rules and regulations and hanging up on each other. Afterward, Gargan argues that they should have this meeting somewhere cheaper to get to than Nashville. This is a little tough to follow, so let's review. Right now, they're debating where they should hold the meeting, in which they'll debate where to hold the convention, in which they'll fight over which faction of the party takes control. So, yes, they are literally having an argument over where to have an argument over where to have an argument. As a consequence, potential disaster is looming. Donald Trump, seemingly the only person capable of beating back a Buchanan candidacy, has been watching all this from the sideline and indicates that if the party can't even pretend to get itself together, he's walking away. And the prospects of the former don't look too hot right now. It has become known that in this Nashville meeting, the Perot faction plans on calling a perhaps rules-violating vote over whether to vote Gargan out as party chairman, just weeks into his term after having won his election fair and square. The first tell that things aren't exactly on the level here. They've insisted on holding this meeting in Nashville, closer to Buchanan forces in Texas and Florida, further from Ventura's orbit in Minnesota, making it likely that fewer Gargan-Ventura loyalists will be able to show up to vote. Second, the person they intend to replace Gargan with is Pat Choate, the very most visibly pro-Buchanan member of the party. Choate pledges to resign his post as Buchanan's campaign co-chair upon election and remain neutral, although I don't think any of us believe that for a second. Meanwhile, do you remember back in '96 when Richard Lamb argued Perot's faction stacked the deck against him by refusing to share official party mailing lists? Nearly 4 years later, they are running back the same play. Outgoing party chair Russ Verney has refused to hand over the party's car keys, bank accounts, financials, membership lists, the things Gargan needs to operate the party, suggesting Verney and his friends never had any intention of Gargan operating it at all. Upon founding the Reform Party in '95, Ross Perot had declared that the last thing he wanted was for this to be about him. It's clear now how little he meant that. This isn't about populism. It isn't about building a viable third party. It's merely a big, huge, expensive expression of whatever a billionaire's latest whim happens to be. Anyone who sees anything more in it than that is gonna end up heartbroken.
Both Ventura and Gargan fully understand what's about to happen here. On February 11th, 2000, the day before the Nashville meeting, Ventura calls a press conference on the steps of the Minnesota State Capitol. He could hold it indoors where it isn't cold enough to see his breath and then some, but that would be too easy.
I can't stay within a national party that could well have Pat Buchanan as its presidential nominee.
He could do what Perot, Verney, the GOP, and a sizable chunk of the media class does and simply put up with all the revolting things Buchanan stands for, but again, that would be too easy.
I can't be part of that, and I won't be part of that.
It's not just Ventura who won't be part of that. He intends to pack up the entire Minnesota Reform Party and take it with him. The party's strongest power center is going away. The party's most powerful figure, its best hope, its only member who has ever won anything, is gone. America has been watching in fascination as this profound display of self-defeat plays out right in front of us. Suppose the Perot faction does indeed win this endless feud and deliver Buchanan the nomination. What's left to win now? Who's left but a gaggle of professional election losers? What is the point? These people appear to believe there still is one. They're in Nashville, waiting to throw Jack Gargan in the trash can. The Buchanan faction has the votes to throw him out, and everybody knows it. It's a meeting that Gargan claims violates party policy, as those who called it haven't given 30 days notice. He could save himself the heartbreak and the abuse, just stay home and let him get himself voted out in absentia. But he attends anyway. February 12th, 2000. The ballroom of the Airport Marriott in Nashville, Tennessee. The historical importance of what will happen on this day and in this room is likely lost on everyone here. Decades later, it's nearly completely forgotten. It's probably why there doesn't appear to be any surviving video. It's why the few photos I've found never made it into digital news archives. The ownership status of those photos has deteriorated over the years to the point at which no one quite knows who owns them, which is why I'm not able to show them to you. But I've seen them, and I will recreate the sequence of the day's events to the best of my ability. Chairman Gargan approaches the lectern to address a congregation of approximately 140 Reform Party members. Things appear civil at first. Gargan leads the room in the Pledge of Allegiance. Then he calls for a moment of silence to honor the victims of the recent Alaska Airlines crash, which the room does indeed observe. And then Gargan opens his mouth and begins presenting his argument that party members were not given 30 days notice, rendering this an illegal meeting, and that any effort to call a vote will be illegitimate. It's at this moment that Jack Gargan appears to fully appreciate how doomed he really is. If the forthcoming vote will be any indication, the Perot-Buchanan faction outnumbers the Gargan loyalists in the room by a count of 109 to 31. Their efforts to hold this meeting on short notice and well south of the Ohio River have paid off tremendously. A thunderous chorus of "out, out, out" reverberates throughout the ballroom, but Gargan stands his ground, shouting back, "This is an illegal meeting." This shouting continues back and forth for longer than 30 minutes. As though to shield him from their slings and arrows, a Gargan supporter jumps on stage in front of him to voice her disgust. She grabs the lectern's microphone, wrestles over it with the party vice chairman, and manages to take it for long enough to declare that this is all Ross Perot's doing, that he is no longer her hero. She's soon hauled out of the room by a security staff that's quickly finding itself unable to restore order and keep these two factions from coming to blows. The Perot sect is becoming increasingly angry that Gargan refuses to call the meeting to order. One woman, known only as Melanie of San Diego, rushes the stage in a brazen attempt to unplug his microphone. She's intercepted by Gargan ally Sue Harris DeBosch, who smacks her and shoves her to the ground. By this point, someone has called 911, and a couple of the 8 police officers summoned to the scene separate the two and escort them out of the room. Gargan continues to decry this meeting as a sham, refusing to move off the lectern even as Party Secretary Jim Manja takes the mic and tries to conduct a roll call, shouting over the shouting. Police demand that Manja step down from the podium. He tells them they'll have to throw him off. And it's at this point when police threaten to shut down the meeting altogether. Finally, Maine Party Representative Wendell Kenny gets hold of another mic and declares that if the 69-year-old Gargan doesn't cede the floor, he will be removed by force. Jack finally seems to realize that it's over. He cannot beat this back. But he doesn't leave the room. He doesn't even leave the stage, instead sequestering himself in the corner. He stays there for hours, proud, obstinate, and increasingly emotional. "You don't even know me," he cries, as the room officially begins to vote him out. He's right. They don't. Many are Buchananites who have arrived within the last few months. They likely neither know nor care that Jack Gargan is the father of this entire movement. One that began when he was as angry as they are now at him. But it wasn't just anger. It was love. Jack Gargan is one of the vanishingly few who has never been in this for himself. His full-page newspaper ads from a decade ago, the ones that started it all, began not by rattling off his innumerable grievances against the powers that be, but a declaration of love for his family, his grandchildren, as well as their grandchildren, the ones he would never meet but loved regardless. He wanted the world to be better and fairer for them than it was for him. He is a true believer, the very sort of soul who the modern American political process crushes and defeats and immiserates. There's this photo taken by a Nashville, Tennessean photographer after Gargan retreats to the corner of the stage, probably after he's been formally voted out as party chairman, but before he leaves. And his face is just buried in his hand as he wipes away tears. He's just bawling. This was the most powerful third-party movement in post-war American history. On February 12th, 2000, in Nashville, Tennessee, they killed it. It died. He watched it die. Or at least, he watched it begin to die. This will not be the last time police are summoned to a Reform Party event. This party's implosion will be even more spectacular than its creation. We're about to see how thoroughly the promise of $12.6 million can corrupt and destroy a party full of desperate fringe candidates and hangers-on. We'll witness a bum rush for that money that's unlike anything else we have ever seen in American politics in our lifetimes. It will attract the oddest coalition of American politicians ever assembled. There will be normies, there will be fascists, there will be communists, there will be candidates with political platforms so bewildering that you will not even accept them as real. Ross Perot has spent these years, unintentionally yet expertly, creating the optimal conditions for infighting, backbiting, thievery, lies, pushing, shoving, slapping, shouting, crying, cop-calling, and eventual self-annihilation that must be seen to be believed.